Hello you all, this is Juan Cruz from Inerize. Welcome to the 5th class of the reading course where you will learn everything that you need to know about this beautiful thing that's books. In this episode, we'll explore what the act of reading does to our brain and why it's so important to develop the habit. Without further ado, let's get going. We tend to believe that writing, reading, and books have been around since the beginning of times, but nothing can be farther from the truth. 150,000 years ago, when humans first developed language, written communication was not in the picture and the only way to exchange information was verbally. Little by little, our ancestors began to use rocks, wood, bones, and pottery to write basic stuff down, but not much. No one really considered using writing as a way to develop ideas or literature. It took more than 140,000 years for humans to develop an adequate medium for this task. The Sumerians were the first to use tables made of clay that, after being washed, enabled them to inscribe it with a reed. Around 2500 BC, the Egyptians invented scrolls, which were a pretty good advancement since they were easy to write on, store, and move around. The problem with scrolls though was that they were very expensive. To solve this, the wax table was invented. Thanks to it, writing became cheaper, much more accessible, and perhaps and most importantly, enabled erasing, which permitted people to use them again and again. The technology surrounding reading and writing improved fast, but there was an unexpected barrier that wasn't letting books fully flourish. There was no space separating the words. This lack of order made reading very demanding. Readers had to pause often and restart sentences over and over again, because comprehension was quite difficult. It took several hundred years for written language to become what we know today. Spaces between words, rules of syntax, and a clear and comprehensive form. And even though these changes may not sound important, they sure were. As these conceptual innovations were introduced, reading became a much more automatic and effortless task. Now people could read without worrying about comprehension and when a word began and ended. In other words, they enabled what we know today as deep reading. In his book The Shallows, Nicholas Carr writes, "What was so remarkable about book reading was that deep concentration was combined with the highly active and efficient deciphering of text and the interpretation of meaning. The reading of a sequence of printed pages was valuable, not just for the knowledge readers acquired from the author's words, but for the way those words set off intellectual vibrations within their own minds." In the quiet spaces opened up by the prolonged, undistracted reading of a book, people made their own associations, drew their own inferences and analogies, fostered their own ideas. They thought deeply as they read deeply. But readers were not the only benefactors of these advancements. Writers were too. Carr continues, "The changes in written language liberated the writer as well as the reader. As soon as the introduction of word spaces made writing easier, authors took up pens and began putting their words onto the page themselves, in private. Their work immediately became more personal and more adventurous. The arguments in books became longer and clearer, as well as more complex and more challenging, as writers strived self-consciously to refine their ideas and their logic. The new medium of books played an indispensable part in the development of science, philosophy, communication, and politics. It opened up the doors to uninterrupted, deep thought, which brought many of the inventions we know and love today, like democracy, physics, and the internet. And if books were at least partially responsible for all of this, imagine what they can do to our physical brain. Let's explore it. Reading is not an easy task. For you to comprehend what you're reading, your brain depends on multiple brain regions, the left temporal cortex to be more specific, as well as communication between them. Simply psychology says, the left temporal lobe is associated with understanding language, learning, memorizing, forming speech, and remembering verbal information. The temporal lobes are also vital for declarative memory and long-term memory. When I read this, I was surprised, but not much to be honest. After years of reading, I can feel my mind connecting different ideas and books time and time again. If I'm reading about Alan Turing and computers, for example, my mind automatically connects it with analogies, maths, and more diverse subjects, which is one of the best feelings ever. In my opinion, reading is key to becoming a good critical and creative thinker. If you want to learn more tips to become a good thinker, check out my video here. Theory of mind is an ability we develop over childhood and refers to attributing mental states to others. Basically, it's like putting ourselves in other people's shoes and realizing that others also have a personal experience independent from ours. One study shows that this is exactly what you develop when you read fiction. Reading stories from other people, either fictional or biographical, make us see the world from their point of view and explore their inner lives. Logically, this helps us understand the beliefs, feelings, and intentions of others in the real world, which is pretty useful. So, if you want to develop your ability to emphasize and put yourself in other people's shoes, reading fiction might be a great training. It may sound too good to be true, but reading has several health benefits that have been proven by various papers and scientists. Just like your muscles weaken when they are not used, your neurons atrophy when they don't fire. Reading is an excellent activity to keep your mind sharp and fresh. In fact, studies show that seniors who read often and solve math problems maintain and even improve their cognitive abilities. Another study shows that only 30 minutes of reading lower blood pressure, heart rate, and stress. Reading is a great way to prepare your brain for a good night's sleep. Of course, avoid reading on Kindles or phones because that will just do the opposite effect. Contrary to binge watching or spending time on the internet, reading books require us long and uninterrupted periods of concentration. If we wish to really understand a book or immerse ourselves in the story, our mind cannot wander too much because if not, we lose the thread of the idea. That's why reading strengthens our ability to focus for longer periods of time. I've been noticing this myself and it's like a superpower. It helps me be more productive at work, perform better when playing sports, become a better thinker, and be more present when relating with people. So yeah, that's another cool benefit of reading and the changes it brings to our brain. But if you want to learn the consequences of the internet on our brain, feel free to check out my video here. And finally, the last change is researchers discovered that the students that are usual readers develop larger vocabularies than the ones who never read, and this has surprising benefits. Having a wider vocabulary can be very helpful for job interviews, tests, and communication. Just as the quote from the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein said, "The limits of my language means the limits of my world." From personal experience, I can say that reading in English helped me a lot to get to a decent level. English, in the rare case you haven't guessed, is not my native language, but nowadays I feel comfortable reading and writing in it. And I can attribute a big part of my skills to reading books in English. So those were 5 things that reading does to our brain. As you might have guessed, I'm a proponent of this habit and I encourage you to give it a try. Thank you very much for watching till the end. Don't forget to subscribe, give it a thumbs up so the YouTube algorithm recommends it to more and more people, share it with a friend who might find this information useful, and if you haven't, check out my reading course, a video series with tips and techniques to make the most out of this beautiful thing that's learning and reading. Again, thank you very much for watching and see you soon.